So, how many of us have played a video game that could be classified as violent? You know, what friends and family members around us may be playing. Games like Grand Theft Auto or Mortal Kombat. Have you or someone you know been playing games like these?
Mhm.
Well, what would you do if you knew that playing such a game had harmful side effects? Or would you keep playing, or would you allow someone you care about to do so? Following the Columbine, Virginia Tech, and Sandy Hook massacres, one of the facts that came to light was that all these deranged young men were seriously addicted to violent video gaming. So the concern was that there'd be some situation like this that the question became, do violent games actually cause children to become mass murderers? Well, back in 2007, it was a hot topic, and the consensus was that no, there is no direct causal link between the two. However, it was discovered, or has been discovered in the years since, that practically everyone is negatively affected when they play a violent video game to some degree. And in fact, some people referred to as those high in moral disengagement are even more susceptible to this effect, which can increase aggressiveness, cheating, as well as a reduced self-control and lack of empathy for others. So clearly it is the best interest of society to ensure that, to censure or otherwise strongly curtail the use of violent video gaming if this is proven to be the byproduct. I mean, this is an undesirable outcome for society, and consequently the creation or promotion of such games should be censured and kept to a minimum, if not utterly banned for use by our youth. Perhaps the most common trait uncovered into research in this subject was that it increases aggressiveness. Quote from researcher Craig Anderson: "Research on violent video games reveals unequivocal evidence that media violence increases the likelihood of aggression and violent behavior in both immediate and long-term contexts." He's a distinguished professor, by the way, at the University of Iowa, who studies violence as his major topic. Developmental psychologist David Gentile has reported that a stunning 98% of pediatricians agree that violent media exposure has a negative impact on childhood aggression. And researcher Craig Anderson also found that exposure to violent video games specifically increases the likelihood of aggressive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and leads to the desensitization to violence, and also leads to decreases in pro-social behaviors and empathy. So clearly, violent video games contribute to an increase in behaviors that are arguably not conducive to society. It has been shown by actually researchers Gentile and Anderson that while you have 91% of kids play games, video games, 90% of the games that they play, or the most popular games, have violence in them. So this is a major issue for the youth in our country. So if increased aggressiveness were the only issue with violent video games, that would be bad enough. However, science has also discovered that there are a whole host of bad results, including things such as increased ability or increased desire to cheat, and also a lack of self-control. In a study that was conducted by media psychologist at the University of Milan, Alessandro Gabbiadini, he said, quote, "Participants who played a violent game exhibited less self-control than those who played a non-violent game. Now, indeed, those who ranked highly for moral disengagement, as I said earlier, demonstrated an even more significant negative relationship, noted by a diminution of self-control." Gabbiadini also found that players of violent video games cheat more. He reports a significant positive relationship between moral disengagement and cheating for violent video game players. Now, I note that conversely, the effect was absent when this was tested on non-violent game players. So that fact alone puts in sharp relief the fact that it's the violence aspect that's the issue, not the gaming milieu itself. Now, counter to this, some might say that, well, there's no real way to tell who might be susceptible to this. And besides which, games have been out there, violent video games have been out there for years and years, and actually the rate of violent crime has been dropping in this country steadily for the last 15 years. Well, a counter to these arguments, first of all, is, as a society, we live by the proverb of it's better to be safe than sorry. For instance, if we know that there's something that can be deleterious to certain segments of our population, we limit and restrict access, such as with alcohol. Also, to the second point, even though there has been a reduction in violent crime overall, the fact is teen violence over time has actually increased. If we see here from 2000 to 2015, it has actually doubled in that same period. This is the same period where, again, violent video games have really come to the fore. So when considering violent video games, ultimately we must take into account what the science has to say on the subject. Gabbiadini has summed up the research and the situation in this way. Many real-world decisions require self-regulation of moral behavior, and playing violent video games interferes with this ability. The last thing we want to do with our youth is put stumbling blocks in their path, or otherwise help to amplify their weaknesses rather than try to magnify their strengths. We know that increased aggressiveness, propensity to cheat, and a loss of self-control are three behavioral patterns that are frowned upon in society, and with good reason. It is of great benefit to society to take every measure to reduce the proliferation of such negative behaviors in our fellow citizens, not to promote them or, worse, pretend that they don't exist at all. It is in all our best interest to cultivate good behaviors and diminish bad, particularly in our youth. So once again, I'm going to quote Gabbiadini, where he said very poignantly, "Exposure to violent video games can cause immoral behaviors." Considering the evidence, it is really a matter of common sense to suggest, at the very least, teens and youth should be banned from playing such games. Thank you.